At 2:17 in the morning, the flatline alarm went off in room 312. Sarah stopped mid-step in the hallway. She'd been a nurse at County General for 4 years. She knew that sound. Every nurse knows that sound. But room 312 had been empty for 6 days. No patient. No admission scheduled. The bed wasn't even made, just a bare mattress and a rolling tray pushed against the wall. She stood there, 20 feet from the door, listening to that unbroken tone slice through the silence of the 4th floor. It went on for 15 seconds. 20, 30, then it stopped. She walked to the room. The door was half open, exactly how she'd left it during her rounds an hour earlier. She pushed it wide and stepped inside. The heart monitor sat on its cart in the corner. Screen black. Power cord coiled on the hook. Not plugged in. Not turned on. Not connected to anything. Sarah left the room and didn't go back for the rest of her shift. Welcome. What you're about to hear are true stories from people who work the night shift in hospitals. Nurses, orderlies, security guards. People who've seen what these buildings become after visiting hours and the lights dim. These aren't stories they tell at staff meetings. Most of them have never talked about these experiences outside of few trusted co-workers who were there, who heard the same sounds, who saw the same things. Some of these people still work nights. Others put in for transfers. A few quit entirely. These are their stories. Exactly as they happened. Let's begin. Jennifer started her shift at Mercy General at 11 p.m. Same as always. The oncology ward on the 5th floor was quiet that night. She had 4 patients, all stable, all asleep by midnight. Rooms 502, 506, 511, and 519. The other 16 rooms sat empty, doors propped open, lights off. This was normal for a Wednesday night. The weekend was when they got admissions. Midweek. The floor practically belonged to her. She did her first round of vitals at midnight. Blood pressure, temperature, oxygen levels. Everyone was fine. Mrs. Chun in 506 was snoring softly. Mr. Alvarez in 511 hadn't moved since she checked on him at 11. By 12:30, she was back at the nurse's station, updating charts on the computer. The floor was silent except for the hum of the vending machine down the hall and the occasional beep from one of the occupied rooms. That's when she heard the call button. It was a soft 2-tone chime, very familiar. It meant a patient needed something: water, pain medication, help getting to the bathroom. She looked up at the panel above her desk. A small orange light was blinking. Room 518. Jennifer frowned. She pulled up the bed assignment chart on her computer. Room 518 was listed as unoccupied. Had been for 2 weeks since Mrs. Delgado was discharged. She stood and walked down the corridor. The lights were motion activated, so they flickered on as she moved, one section at a time. Room 518 was near the end, just before the supply closet. The door was closed. That was odd. Empty rooms were usually left open. She turned the handle and stepped inside. The lights were off. She flipped the switch. Empty bed. Bare mattress. No linens. No pillow. The 4-pole was pushed into the corner. The bedside table had been wiped down. She could still smell the faint chemical scent of the disinfectant. The call button hung from the bed rail on a coil cord. She picked it up and examined it. The button itself looked fine. Not stuck, not damaged. She pressed it once. Heard the chime echo from the nurse's station down the hall. Then she unpressed it and hung it back on the rail. Probably a short in the wiring. She'd submit a maintenance request in the morning. She was back at the station, typing up the note when the chimes sounded again. Room 518. Jennifer stopped typing. She stared at the blinking orange light. She'd just been in there 30 seconds ago. She walked back down the hallway. The lights flickered on again as she approached. The door to 518 was still closed. She opened it. Same empty room. Same bare mattress. Same call button hanging from the rail, motionless. This time, she didn't just look at it. She grabbed it, yanked the cord from the wall jack, and tucked the whole thing under the mattress so it couldn't accidentally get pressed. She stood there for a moment, scanning the room. Nothing had changed. Nothing was out of place. She left, pulling the door closed behind her with a solid click. At the nurse's station, she made a note, call button malfunction in 518. Disconnected. Maintenance needed. She went back to her charting. At 1:15 a.m., the chime sounded again. Room 518. Jennifer didn't move right away. She sat at the desk, staring at the panel. The orange light blinked steadily. On, off, on, off. She'd unplugged it. She knew she'd unplugged it. She stood slowly and walked back down the hall. This time, she didn't rush. Her footsteps echoed on the linoleum. The door to 518 was open, not just cracked, fully open, wide enough to see inside from the hallway. She stopped in the doorway. The call button was still tucked under the mattress where she'd left it, cord still unplugged, hanging loose. But the room felt wrong. The air was colder, not freezing, but noticeably cooler than the hallway. And there was a smell, faint but distinct, not disinfectant, something stale, like old fabric that hadn't been aired out in a long time. She stepped inside. That's when she heard it, a rustling sound, soft, like someone shifting their weight on a mattress, the sound of a body adjusting position. She turned toward the bed. The mattress was still bare, still empty, but the sound didn't stop. It continued for 3, maybe 4 seconds. A slow, deliberate movement, then silence. Jennifer backed out of the room. She didn't close the door. She just walked back to the nurse's station, sat down, and didn't look at the panel for the rest of her shift. When the morning nurse arrived at 7 a.m., Jennifer mentioned it casually while giving report. Hey, the call button in 518 keeps going off. I unplugged it, but it's still doing it. Might want to have maintenance check the whole system. The other nurse nodded without looking up from her coffee. 518 does that, she said. It's been doing that for months. We just ignore it now. Jennifer stared at her. You could have mentioned that. The nurse shrugged. You get used to it. Jennifer transferred to day shift 3 weeks later. Marcus had been working as a patient transporter at St. Vincent's for 2 years. It wasn't glamorous work, but it was steady. His job was simple. When a nurse called for a transport, he'd get paged with a room number and a destination. He'd show up with a wheelchair or a gurney, move the patient where they needed to go, and then wait for the next call. Night shift were quieter, fewer transports, mostly ER to ICU or patients going down to imaging for emergency scans. It was a Tuesday night, sometime after 2 a.m. He just brought a patient up from the ER to the cardiac unit and was heading back down to the first floor break room when his pager buzzed. He pulled it from his belt and checked the screen. Room 312 CT scan. He frowned. CT scans weren't usually scheduled this late unless it was an emergency, and he hadn't seen anything come through the ER. He radioed the third floor nurse's station. Hey, this is Marcus. You guys call for a transport from 312. A pause. Static. Then a woman's voice came through. Negative. 312's empty tonight. We've only got 5 patients up here, none in that room. Marcus looked at his pager again. The message was still there, clear as day. You sure? Positive. That room's been empty since Sunday. He clipped the radio back to his belt. Probably a clerical error. Maybe someone had entered the wrong room number. But he was already on the first floor, and the third floor was just 2 flights up. He'd check it out. The third floor was dimly lit. They turned off half the hallway lights after midnight to save energy, so every other section was dark. Room 312 was at the far end of the hall, past the nurse's station, near the old supply elevator that nobody used anymore. The door was closed. Marcus knocked lightly, more out of habit than anything else. No answer. He opened the door and stepped inside. The lights were off. He found the switch and flipped it. Empty room. The bed was made, but there were no linens, just the plastic-covered mattress. No 4-pole, no monitors, no chart holder on the door. The bathroom door was open, and he could see it was empty too. He stood there for a moment, looking around. Nothing unusual, just a vacant patient room. He was about to leave when his pager buzzed again. He pulled it out. Room 312 CT scan. Marcus stared at the screen. He was standing in room 312. The room was empty. There was no patient to transport. He radioed the nurse's station again. Hey, I'm in 312 right now. There's nobody here. You guys seeing something in the system I'm not? The same voice came back, slightly annoyed now. Marcus, I'm telling you, that room is empty. We don't have anyone assigned to 312. Check your pager. It's probably a glitch. He looked at the pager again. The message was still there. He turned back toward the room. The door had swung halfway closed. He didn't remember touching it. He stepped back into the hallway and let the door click shut behind him. His pager buzzed a third time. Room 312 CT scan. Marcus walked back to the door. He didn't radio the nurse's station this time. He just stood there, staring at the handle. Then he opened it. The lights were still on. He'd left them on. He was sure of it. But now the bed looked different. The blanket was pulled back. Not all the way, just folded down, like someone had just gotten out of it. The pillow had a slight indentation in the center. Marcus stepped inside slowly. The bathroom door was closed now. He stared at it. He hadn't closed it. He looked inside when he first came in. It had been open. He took a step toward the bathroom. From the other side of the door, he heard 3 slow, deliberate knocks. Marcus turned and walked out of the room. He didn't run. He didn't slam the door. He just walked calmly back down the hallway, took the stairs to the basement, and spent the rest of his shift reorganizing the wheelchair storage area. When his shift ended at 7 a.m., he went to HR and requested a transfer to today's shift. They asked him why. He said he had a scheduling conflict. 2 weeks later, he was on days. He never got paged to room 312 again. Daniel had worked at Riverside Hospital for 9 years. He started as an orderly when he was 23, right out of community college, and he'd been there ever since. He knew the building better than most of the doctors. He knew which elevators were slow, which floors got cold at night, which wings still had asbestos in the ceiling tiles. He'd worked day shift, swing shift, weekend shift. But for the last 4 years, he'd been on nights, 11 p.m. to 7 a.m., 5 days a week. The work was simple. Restock supplies, move equipment between floors, clean up spills, help nurses lift patients who'd fallen, handle the tasks that didn't require a medical license but still needed to get done. He liked nights. Fewer people, less chaos. The hospital felt different after midnight. Quieter, calmer. He'd gotten used to the sounds. The hum of the HVAC system, the rhythmic beeping from patient monitors, the occasional overhead page for a code or a rapid response. But there was one part of the hospital he'd started to avoid, the old psychiatric wing. The wing had been closed since 2015. Budget cuts. The hospital had built a new behavioral health unit on the south side of the campus, and the old wing, tucked into the northwest corner of the main building, had been essentially abandoned. The rooms were still there. The beds, the furniture, even some of the old patient belongings that nobody had ever claimed. But the doors were locked, the windows were sealed, and the whole section had been sectioned off with key cards that only maintenance and security had access to. Daniel's route sometimes took him through it. There was a storage annex on the far side of the wing where they kept extra linens, backup monitors, and old equipment that was still functional but not in active rotation. If he needed something from the annex, the fastest way was to cut through the old psych wing. He'd done it hundreds of times. But about 6 months ago, he started noticing something. Room 47. The door was always open. Not every time he walked through, but often enough that it stood out. The first time, he assumed maintenance had left it that way. Maybe they were checking the room, or airing it out, or clearing out old supplies. He closed the door and kept walking. A week later, the door was open again. He closed it again. 2 weeks after that, open. He started paying attention. Every time he walked through the wing, he'd look at room 47, and at least half the time, the door was open. One night, he mentioned it to Clara, one of the ICU nurses he'd worked with for years. They were in the break room, both on their lunch break around 3 a.m. "You ever go through the old psych wing?" he asked. She looked up from her sandwich. "Sometimes." "Why?" "You ever notice room 47? Her expression changed. "Not much. Just a flicker of something. Recognition, maybe, or unease." "What about it?" "The door's always open." She didn't say anything for a moment. Then she set her sandwich down. "I used to take that route," she said quietly. "I don't anymore." "Why not?" She hesitated. "Because I saw someone in there once." Daniel stared at her. "What do you mean, you saw someone?" "I mean, I looked inside, and there was a person standing by the window." "A patient?" "No." She shook her head. "The wing's been closed for years. There's no patients, no staff. Nobody's supposed to be in there." "So who was it?" "I don't know. I didn't stay to find out." She picked up her sandwich and took a bite, clearly done with the conversation. Daniel didn't push it, but he couldn't stop thinking about it. 2 nights later, he went back. He told himself he was just going to settle it, prove to himself that it was nothing, that Clara had seen a shadow or a reflection, or maybe a maintenance worker who wasn't supposed to be there. He walked through the psych wing just after midnight. The hallway was dark except for the emergency exit lights at either end. The air smelled stale, dust and old paint and something faintly medicinal. Room 47 was closed. He stopped in front of it and listened. Silence. He reached for the handle, then paused. From inside the room, he heard footsteps. Not hurried, not frantic, just slow, deliberate steps moving from one side of the room to the other. Daniel stepped back from the door. The footsteps stopped. He stood there, barely breathing. Then, from the other side of the door, a voice spoke. Quiet, almost a whisper. "Are you still there?" Daniel turned and walked back the way he'd come. He didn't answer. He didn't look back. He just walked calmly down the hallway, through the double doors and out of the psych wing. He never used that route again. He started taking the long way to the storage annex, down 2 flights of stairs through the cafeteria, and back up the east stairwell. It added 10 minutes to his trip, but he didn't care. A few weeks later, Clara asked him if he'd gone back to room 47. He said no. She nodded. "Good. Did you ever find out who it was?" he asked. She looked at him for a long moment. "I don't think it was a who," she said. And that was the last time they talked about it. If you've ever worked a night shift, whether in a hospital, a factory, a hotel, or anywhere else where you're alone in a building that feels too big and too quiet, you know that things change after midnight. The sounds are different. The shadows are different. And sometimes the rules are different. These stories come from real people. People who were there. People who heard the footsteps, saw the doors open, felt the cold air that shouldn't have been there. This is the first episode in our Night Shift Horror Story series. In the coming weeks, we'll be sharing more. From security guards who patrol empty office buildings, from factory workers who hear machines running in sections that have been shut down, from hotel staff who deliver room service to empty floors. If you have a story from your own night shift, we want to hear it. Until then, stay safe out there, especially after midnight.